As promised, I'm back. Legends CA was recently announced and it could be a new turning point for the franchise. I already mentioned in the last video my wishes for this new title to have a bright future, but there's still the other side of the coin. So today, I will share with you some of the things that I don't want to see in these games, based on what little we got to know and theorize with its trailer, and especially on what we already experienced in its predecessor, Legends Arceus. For me, the most bittersweet game of the series in many ways. But let's go one step at a time, starting with hollow and wasted Mega Evolutions. You already know that my vision of these forms is a bit particular. For me, its power is secondary, being much more important how it plays with the base concept of the Pokémon to take it to the next level in an ingenious and coherent way. Mega Beedrill gains new limbs that eventually join together at a single point when attacking, to concentrate all its strength into one just devastating strike. Scizor increases its metabolism to such an extent that it even boosts its body temperature, making it much more efficient at the cost of deteriorating its metallic body and the inner box health while maintaining this form. You can even see how its pincers have melted. Gengar releases its hidden evil, making it a living nightmare of unstoppable power. But those are some brutal examples of the idea of Mega Evolution, one that forces the Pokemon's internal strength, even if it brings real pain and it's at the expense of its well-being. In my video explaining how I interpret this form, many of you thought that I didn't like Mega Evolutions because of that sinister side, when it's actually the opposite. I had always seen them as a stunning but hollow attempts to get attention, and finding such sinister and unique undertones made me come to terms with a phenomenon that is much deeper than it seems. I really hope they don't break out of this narrative. There are some unbelievably ingenious forms, but also ones that do nothing interesting with the Pokemon's original concept, by merely making already powerful and popular creatures look more edgy and cool. I understand that Mega Evolution is going to be the biggest selling points of this title and that some fanservice is always fine, but that doesn't have to be against giving them that unexpected twist that makes these forms work, giving Mega forms to not so strong Pokemon to diversify the viable team's good and heart. But there are other forms that I really hope will be present, because I personally enjoy them even more than Mega Evolution, and it would be very sad to see them disappear. Yes, I'm talking about regional forms. I was impressed by how they used them in Hisui to introduce us to extend the species, and in particular, I'm excited to think about Colossian forms of the final stages of the starters. But then I remembered that the main focus of the game is Lumiose City, where the professor gives us the Kanto starters and that they are capable of— Jeez, I almost lost it. Please, everything but that. But besides the starters, I'm afraid that the diverse regional forms, which give a completely new face to Pokemon we knew well, will disappear. To be honest, I think there would be no problem with the new Mega Evolutions coexisting with the regional forms, especially given the fact that the Gigantamax forms had nothing to envy to Megas in the quantity and depth of their designs and coexisted with its contemporary Galarian forms. But if you add to the equation that it seems like the action will be focused only in the city, I'm worried about the possibility that they will disappear in this title, and it will be the beginning of the end of the regional forms that already had a minor presence in the last generation. Let's hope I'm wrong, since you guys know it's one of my favorite features of the Pokemon games. Or maybe the concept will have some kind of evolution, like what we saw in Scarlet and Violet with a conversion species. But related to this, something that many may not agree with, but I believe there should not be room for in this title given what we have seen, is an open world. The response from the community was, as usual, mixed. Some people celebrated it as a logical step for the evolution of the franchise, and something they had wanted since they were kids. The chance to experience a Pokemon world without barriers. Others, myself included, saw it as a burden, draining a lot of already scarce development time, which at the end of the day could lead to all the problems of this generation. But even ignoring that, there's nothing nothing in the story or structure of the game that made the open world necessary to make it work. The same 3 stories could have been told in the same way, even better, by just creating an open region that gives freedom to the player, but with a classic structure, with enclosed and well-detailed areas, and less of whatever the hell this is. Anyway, with the treasure hunt story, the open world was a failed idea, but it made some sense in Paldea. The same cannot be said for this version of Legends, as I don't think it will bring anything positive to continue with it. I believe Pokémon needs to go back to its roots, maps that encourage exploration, but of closed and defined zones, rich in details and secrets, and culturally strong and diverse. When I heard that the action was going to be centered in Lumio City, at first it was a relief to think that meant we were going to be free of the open world by now, but then it hit me that in Legends Arceus there was also only one city, surrounded by that erratic and rough world. So for now, the fear is still there. But do you know what else scared me playing Legends Arceus? Aside from swimming more than 2 seconds, I mean, beating the crap of the gods of creation is perfectly fine, but don't make me cross a pond, cause I will die. But what frightened me every time an interesting part happened was that in order to get to the next part of the plot, I was going to have to spend hours catching Pokemon. I can understand that the game was intended to be more comfy, so to speak, slowing down the usual frenetic rhythm to encourage you to get lost in the region and catch the native species. And I know that there are many players who enjoy and relax with this type of more chill experience. But what if, as was my case, you simply don't connect with the catch mechanics and what draws your attention to the game or other things? Well, in order to advance with the story, you are forced to spend hours and hours doing something that, added to how repetitive it can become quite annoying. This was, without a doubt, my biggest problem while playing this title, to the point of being tempted to simply quit the game and watch a playthrough to learn about the story, something that had never happened to me before in the series. Don't judge me, I just wanted to make videos and the game couldn't let me off the hook. Well, okay, maybe that was me rushing a bit, but in the end I don't see the point in forcing the player to slow down the pace that much. Any requirements for progress that have nothing to do with skill should be greatly moderated or completely removed to allow each type of player to enjoy the experience the way they want to, especially considering that we don't know what kind of game mechanic this new title is going to focus on. Catching Pokemon throughout Hisui has a pass, but can you imagine that to rank up in the new Legends you have to go as an errand boy doing hundreds of bad side quests to follow the story we are being told? But speaking of that, if I have to mention the biggest fear for the Legends line, much more so if we are talking about this version setting, it's that its story could be a disappointment. In my opinion, Pokemon comes from outdoing itself in that aspect in the 9th gen, which is funny since for some reason with the first trailers I had a bad feeling about the story of Scarlet and Violet, and boy was I wrong. But what happened with Legends Arceus? Well, the opposite. The idea of revisiting one of the regions with more lore like Sinnoh in the past made the possibilities blow my mind. But in the end, we found ourselves with games that were much more focused on the world and its mechanics, and in my opinion, brutally disappointing in everything that had to do with its story. Its plot is slow, flat and predictable, barely tapping into the backstory idea of a world where the relationship between humans and Pokemon was much more hostile. The dialogue usually goes in circles to just end in nothing, especially at the beginning, and the most redeeming aspect could be its characters, but it was also super underwhelming to see that the game does practically nothing with the fact that many are ancestors of others in the present. It's obvious that, with some few exceptions, the game left very much in the background everything related to story in favor of gameplay, which, for me, in this particular game with that premise, was a big mistake that I hope won't be perpetuated in the next Legends. For the neglected Kalos. It would be even more serious. This region desperately needs redemption in that sense, and the teaser plants seeds with so much potential that the thought of them leaving all that aside again to focus only on gameplay is pure cosmic horror. The Great War, the subsequent reconstruction of the region with Lumiose City as a symbol of light and understanding. I sincerely hope that they give love to that aspect of the game so important to many of us. Another aspect of Legends that I would run away from is its bizarre lack of trainer battles. I really enjoyed the few in the game with its reward system, with the unique strong and agile styles and the radical change in the way the status conditions and most moves work. After so many years, it felt like a new and refreshing experience, with the climax in one of the most interesting, challenging and epic final battles of the entire series. By the way, I'm not a fan of the free motion camera in combat. Seeing the player interacting with the attacks was kind of funny, but it didn't add anything substantial, and I prefer them to work properly on epic and cinematic shots. But I loved the actual system, and for me it was a war crime to neglect something that could well have been one of the game's biggest assets by including barely 30 battles. And to top it off, most trainers have very few Pokemon in their team. Once again, I understand that they wanted to focus the experience on catching Pokemon and the action RPG aspect of the boss battles, but even with that, the trainer battles feel totally insufficient to really experience and enjoy that traditional way of combat. There should be a middle path between that and the villainous team spamming grunts at their hideout. Since training Pokemon wasn't something established in society, I get that you won't find dozens of battles per area with random NPCs. They could have taken the chance to, I don't know, show the establishment of a proto competition that inspired the future creation of gyms and the Pokemon League, or introduce characters from the same era but from other regions, more familiar with the battles and coexistence with Pokemon, taking advantage of the fact that Hisui's events are inspired by the Meiji era, which modernized Japan and opened up the country to the world. Kalos promises to be quite different, although the same risks are still present. I personally would be very excited if we saw a unique combat system from the Kalos era, or eras that the game ultimately focuses on. And if so, I hope they take advantage of it with a more active and competitive region than Hisui. But perhaps the most promising and at the same time frightening aspect of this game is everything to do with its timing. It looks like this will be the first time in many years that the franchise will finally go 2 years without new mainline releases. Probably the best possible news we could have for the series. Or second best, after the fact that a chibi head Getsus will not become real for now. But if we go back to the first Legends game, we see that the times were very similar. Although that time gameplay was shown, leading one to believe that development was more advanced, this time it may come out at a later point in the year. I have no idea what is going to happen, but the fact that there is no game this year is already a step forward. I hope it will not be a weird mirage, and perhaps because of the decadent technical side of Scarlet and Violet, they will take the path of increasing development time to something more coherent. It would be certainly one of my great wishes, not only for this title, but for the series in general. The more time it takes, the better. In the meantime, rest assured that we will continue to provide exciting videos and Pokemon content to keep the series alive. For now, if you are hungry for more, you can take a look at my ranking of the game protagonists from weakest to strongest. You can also follow me on social media to see all the Pokemon art I'm doing lately and stay in touch with everything. Be nice!